Unit 7. Contracts. California Principles Audio Review. What does emancipated mean in legal terms? Emancipation ends the legal authority that a parent has over a child who is under 18. After emancipation, your parent doesn't have to take care of you or pay for things that you need. What does sole proprietor mean in real estate? One-owner business. A sole proprietorship is a one-owner business. Unlike a corporation, LLC, or partnership, it is not a separate legal entity. The business owner, proprietor, personally owns all the assets of the business and is in sole charge of its operation. Is a real estate agent a sole proprietor or corporation? Unless incorporated, a real estate agent likely reports income as a sole proprietor. This means that the real estate agent pays taxes on the full amount earned without deferral, separation, or the ability to split with family members. Put simply, actual fraud is intentional concealment or misrepresentation of the facts. So, unlike with constructive fraud, there has to be intent to lie in order to be charged with actual fraud. What are examples of actual fraud? Actual fraud is an intentional misrepresentation of fact or in plain terms lying. Example. An example would be if an agent told a buyer that the basement of a property was mold-free when he or she knew full well that it did have mold. Undue influence occurs when someone in a position of trust or authority takes advantage of an individual to wrongfully obtain all or a portion of their estate. What is an example of undue influence in real estate? Another example of undue influence is when a real estate company or brokerage employee is threatened to lose their job. To avoid this, they are required to sign a contract agreeing to unreasonable terms in a real estate transaction. What is an oral listing agreement? An oral agreement to work for a client in expectation of a fee, while creating an agency duty of the highest level, does not assure payment of a fee. The client is not bound by their promise to pay unless stated in a written document they have signed. Generally, sellers' agents do not face issues about oral agreements. Are verbal listing contracts legally binding? It is crucial to keep in mind that verbal agreements to sell real estate aren't legally binding. To be legally enforceable, a contract to buy real estate must be in writing, agreed to, and signed by both buyer and seller. The right of rescission refers to the right of a consumer to cancel certain types of loans. If you are refinancing a mortgage, and you want to rescind, cancel, your mortgage contract, the 3-day clock does not start until you sign the credit contract, usually known as the promissory note. What is the difference between rescission and cancellation of contract? Contract rescission is the legal term used when a contract is terminated or cancelled. It may also be called overturning or cancellation of a contract. Contract rescission ends the contract. Often, this also cancels any of the legal responsibilities that were in the contract. What is a rescission example? Cancellation of a contract. Rescission may be unilateral, as when a party rightfully cancels a contract because of another party's material breach. Rescission can also be mutual, as when the contracting parties agree to discharge all remaining obligations. What is rescission of the purchase agreement? A rescission notice is a legal form that buyers sign if they back out of an offer to buy a home. The buyer's agent submits this form to the listing agent so the sellers know the deal is off. Most often, these forms are used after an offer has been accepted and the purchase and sale agreement is signed by both parties. What is a release clause? Simple definition. A release clause allows one party to release interest in another party's property. Release clauses can be used in multiple situations, including within a mortgage contract and when selling a property. Generally, a novation is a legal instrument used to replace one obligation or party with another in a contract. All parties in the original contract must agree to the changes to execute a novation. Once all parties accept it, the novation nullifies and replaces the previous agreement. What is an example of novation contract? An example of novation that replaces a contract's obligation. Anna and Jose then decide to settle the debt with a piece of artwork they both agree is worth $100 instead of with cash. This novation will replace the original obligation to pay $100 in cash with a new obligation to pay with the piece of artwork. What is the purpose of a novation agreement? A novation is an agreement made between two contracting parties to allow for the substitution of a new party for an existing one. What are the three ways a contract ends due to impossibility of performance? One of the parties is injured and can no longer perform the duties identified in the contract. Stolen or destroyed property, that is, contract for home remodeling that can no longer be performed if the home is destroyed. Weather conditions. Natural disaster. When the performance of the contract becomes physically impossible is called as. Impossibility of performance is a legal concept that allows one party to be released from a contract if unforeseen circumstances prevent the contract's performance. What is the defense of impossibility of performance? Under contract law, impossibility is an excuse that can be used by a seller as an excuse for non-performance when an unforeseen event occurs after the contract is made which makes performance impossible. What makes a contract terminated? If something happens which makes it impossible for a party to the contract to fulfill their obligations, then a contract may be terminated on the grounds of frustration. This can also apply if events alter an obligation so that it is substantially changed from what was initially intended. Specific performance is a common remedy for a failed purchase and sale of real property. By initiating a specific performance cause of action, the buyer or seller of real property asks the court to compel the other party to perform its contractual obligation to either buy or sell the property. What does specific performance mean in a real estate contract? Specific performance is the legal enforcement of a contract, typically after one party has breached the agreement. For example, a seller of a property executes a purchase agreement with a buyer and then decides they do not want to sell the property shortly thereafter. What does order for specific performance mean? A contractual remedy in which the court orders a party to actually perform its promise as closely as possible, because monetary damages are somehow inadequate to fix the harm. Most commonly ordered in cases involving real property and rare chattels. What is specific performance in real estate example? For example, a contract for the sale of a specific piece of property, in which the owner pulls out, may result in a specific performance order requiring the seller to complete the sale to put the buyer in the position they would have enjoyed if the contract had been honored in the first place. What does statute of limitation mean? A statute of limitations is a law that sets the maximum amount of time that parties involved in a dispute have to initiate legal proceedings from the date of an alleged offense, whether civil or criminal. What is the statute of limitations in California for real estate transactions? 4 years statute of limitations written real estate contract. Pre-printed contracts. Handwriting take precedent over both typing and printing. Property description 250 acres more or less. Sufficient of reasonably close exact acreage. Well-drafted real estate purchase contract provision. Buyer's possession of property. Financing terms. Proration of property expense. Proceeds of sale real estate property withheld for federal tax purchases by the IRS. Liquidated damages paid by buyer cannot exceed 3% purchase price. Seller receives offer of $610. Seller asking $635. Seller counters $625. Buyer rejects counter offer. Seller can't accept $610 anymore. This is the end of Unit 7. Contracts.